What's up, Lego builders? Welcome back to Coconut Brick Studios. Now, I often get asked if I have any tips or suggestions for beginning MOC builders, those who are about to or have just started making their first forays into making Lego custom creations. To be honest, I have a hard time coming up with a good answer because I've been doing this for so long.
Hi there, young people. Nice day today.
That any answer I come up with seems overly simple or too obvious to be helpful. But I have been obsessed with MOC building for so long that I forget what it was like in the beginning and all the things I didn't know and had to learn, and how overwhelming this whole MOC building experience and world can be. So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you 6 tips for MOC building beginners. If you're watching this and you feel like you're not getting anything out of it, you're probably watching the wrong video.
Hey there. Is there a project you're working on?
I know more than you.
All right.
But I do have another tutorial video for those who crave a bigger challenge. I'll put a link to that up at the top of the video and down below in the comments. Everybody else, buckle on your learning hats and let's get started. And real quick, before I get into the video, I want to say that this tutorial isn't really going to be about how to source parts or get base plates or stuff like that. That's pretty easy. I mean, you can basically just go to any store, buy Lego sets, Bricklink, lego.com. If you don't know how to work Bricklink, you can look up tutorials on how to do that. Basically, I feel like gathering parts and stuff is the easier part. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the technical and mental side. So tip number 1 is start small. It's much easier to learn and practice on smaller MOCs than large scale ones. I've seen people before, whether it be in chats or comments, say, oh man, I wish I could build this big, but I only have this many base plates or this many pieces. That's perfectly fine. That's a great place to start. In fact, learning techniques and kind of your whole MOC building process on a small scale is going to do much more for you than trying to jump straight away into big projects, because having a good process and the experience of finishing projects is so much more important on bigger ones, and you can burn out much easier. Whereas if you start with little MOCs and kind of get your process down, like how you plan out a MOC, how you design it, how you source parts, how you go about building it, if you get that process down, it's so much easier to just scale upward as you go. And the more little MOCs you build, you slowly build your parts collection. That's actually how I started out. If you look on my channel, my first MOCs were not big at all. They're really small. In fact, my first one, I didn't even have enough pieces to cover the entire base plate. But I slowly collected more and more parts as I did slightly larger and larger MOCs until I attempted my first large scale one. So if you're just getting in and you're frustrated because you only have a limited amount of parts, space, or budget, that's perfectly fine. That is a great place to start. Tip number 2, always be visualizing. What I mean by this is when you go out in public, whether you're at school, work, friend's house, family's house, visualize what's around you and think, how would I build this in Lego? When we sit down and build a MOC, whether it be Star Wars, city, our own imagination, whatever it is you're working on, we have to take an actual image, thought, scene, or idea and build it in Lego form. And that's a practiced skill. That's not something you're just born with. For example, let's say you're out at a restaurant eating dinner with the family. You look at the table, how would I put this together? What pieces would I use? You look at the light fixtures. What are the best pieces to capture the look and shape of that light fixture? And then the more you do this, your brain's gonna kind of always just think in Lego. That's something I've been working towards. It's definitely come to me easier and easier. And then when you get home and you're working on your MOC, you'll look at that picture and your brain is going to much quicker think like, okay, what pieces could I use? What pieces do I have? And how best to capture what it is you're trying to build. Tip number 3 is kind of the first actual physical building technique, and that is work on exposed studs. This is something I see a lot with kind of earlier or more beginning MOCs, especially with myself. Not exposing studs creates more work. You have to put in more layers. You have to add down either tile or snot or something else smooth. But the more smooth surfaces and less exposed studs you have in your MOC, it's going to look better and more professional. So this is actually a great technique to immediately make your MOCs better. You don't have to learn some crazy technique and take a vast amount of knowledge. You can literally just start putting down more tiles. I noticed a big shift in my MOCs when I started doing this. The first one was Utapau. That was the first large scale MOC where I dedicated a lot of time and money into making it look more finished and smooth. You saw the platforms were all snot. A lot of the terrain had the tile down. The platforms were mostly tile, and it did take a lot more time, a little bit more engineering. I had to, add in more layers and stuff. But at the end of the day, I got a much more professional looking result. And this is another one of those things, can be achieved a little bit of a time, just slowly collecting more and more tiles. Tip number 4, coming up with the idea. We all love to sit down and throw together an awesome Lego MOC project. Oftentimes, for myself included, the hard part is coming up with the idea. What exactly do you build? I found a good way to help kickstart ideas and get you building is to pick a technique you saw somewhere, you saw someone else do, you want to try it yourself, and start working on that and build the MOC around it. I've done this multiple times where I've started a MOC, and the main idea behind the MOC was just getting to use some kind of technique or side build. One example that came to mind was this good old little Naboo statue head. I didn't come up with this design. I saw it in someone's stop motion and I thought it was really cool, and I was like, I have to build a Gungan MOC based around this. So I built this and then built a whole MOC and put the statue in it. Oftentimes you don't need to have this grand epic idea to get started. All you need is one thing. You're like, okay, I've got the parts for this technique, I want to practice it. And then as you get building, you're going to kickstart the idea and creative side of your brain and slowly add on to it and eventually create a MOC. Tip number 5, avoid comparing yourself to others. This one, I know, probably seems obvious, but it was one that I felt was important to share. When creating or working on something, we tend to compare what we're doing with others around us. Typically those we're looking up to or trying to emulate, which means we're comparing our best as beginners to the best of professionals. And that's gonna lead to us feeling disheartened and unmotivated, feeling like there's this massive gap between what we can do and what they can do. Instead, it's important to focus on yourself and comparing your MOCs to your previous MOCs to see the improvement. If you're solely focused on that, it won't matter what everybody else is doing because we're all growing at different levels, right? There's always gonna be someone better than you, there's always gonna be someone worse than you, but if you can stay in your lane and stay focused on you, it'll really help you feel more motivated and won't get down on yourself as much because you'll look and be like, wow, this is what I built and this is what I was building 6 months ago. This is also a good way to avoid burnout. I know creator burnout is a huge topic and it's an important one, and not comparing yourself to others will help you see that growth that you need in order to avoid burning out. Tip number 6, the final one. This one was one of the ones I was most excited to share and was a big revelation for me. And that is a finished just okay or even bad MOC will do more for you than an unfinished masterpiece. I've talked about this idea with a couple of people, and I'm definitely not the first person to come up with this, but it was a huge revelation to me when I realized it's better to just finish the MOC, and maybe it didn't turn out as good as you would have liked, but you completed a project and you have that process down more from start to finish. I'm sure we've all had projects where we just kept tinkering away with it, trying to make it look better, make it perfect, just didn't feel perfect, and it never gets done. It sits on the shelf. Every time when you look at it, you feel depressed and unmotivated, and that leads to burnout as well. So if you feel yourself struggling with this and you just feel like you have to put out the perfect creation, remember, in the beginning, it's more important to get that project done, because here's the thing, not every project's gonna be your best project, and I'm not saying don't worry about the details, like don't strive to be better. Like obviously you wanna put out a good project, but if you feel like the desire to be perfect or as close to perfect as possible is holding you back from finishing projects, it's probably no longer helpful. I hope you found at least some of these tips helpful and are more confident to start or continue on your own MOC building journey. I know most of these were more mental than actual physical or technical, but I mean, sourcing parts is fairly easy to do. Getting base plates and minifigures, the hard part is the mentality. Let me know which of these tips was your favorite down below in the comments, as well as if there are any other tutorials you'd like to see me do in the future, and I will catch you next time. But until then, happy building.